Hello everyone. I am Crawlers and I am going to give you my 2 cents about the Star Wars Battlefront 2 beta, although I clearly cannot afford to give away 2 cents. So, this is a Star Wars game and a very similar one to the previous Star Wars Battlefront, which, should be fairly obvious to everyone at this point, but there is nothing revolutionary, but let's dive into the details in some ways. Anyway, so obviously, the strongest point in this game by far seems to be the graphics and the sounds, which are, out of this world, pun intended. And, the space battles, the lasers, the sounds, the leaves and particles, and even the birds on Naboo. In fact, Naboo looks stunning. When you're inside that, the palace, it's just amazing to see. And uh, it's let's just take a break for a second from all the reaming of all the new games in reviews for clickbait purposes, as is tradition for any up-and-coming releases, and just sit back and admire the developers like DICE for a second, or just how far and the games have come and how amazing they've become, in terms of graphics and sounds and everything else. Can you imagine a Star Wars game that actually looks better than the movies in some cases? It's just fantastic. And actually, I'm not a Star Wars Battlefront fan in any way. In fact, I haven't been buying the previous Battlefront games. I've always been a Battlefield fanboy. DICE hooked me at that Bad Company 2 trailer when, that Apache helicopter made a low pass over the buggy and the gunner in the back was just going and I tell you, it made me harder than Chinese algebra. I immediately pre-ordered and never looked back to COD again. And speaking of COD, World War II, and the current hot topic of pay to win. Now, we come to the bad side of the game, arguably the bad side. First, the problem as is presented by 95% of YouTubers out there and most of the circle jerk on Reddit, it seems at the moment, that is buying loot crates and, that contain cards and unlocks that can be done with real world money. But again, that should not be surprising to anyone. That's nothing new because EA has charged for battle packs and shortcut kits for a few years now. Thing is, only the people with a bunch of money to spare will most likely pay to level up instantly because, and get all the unlocks and things like that, the star cards and additions to weapons modifiers, because, people like big name YouTubers, you know who you are, but here's the other side of it. Loot crates can be unlocked using in-game currency. It just takes a really freaking long time to, grind these things out, making it somewhat similar to a free-to-play, pay-to-win game, but not really. It's starting to look a little bit like, World of Tanks, but at the same time, it's not there yet, thankfully. And the problem as I see it is big name YouTubers with cash to spare will, as I said, unlock the character's progression on day one and leave the rest of us mortals out there getting absolutely pawned by, bigger and better weapons and having their lasers just bounce off, having our lasers rather, but just bounce off the enemy just because their, star cards give them 40% more HP because they paid for it. Obviously that's bad, but as I said, the progression doesn't have a lot to do with loot crates, which just give you a random item much like a battle pack used to, Um, it's just that they might have taken it a bit too far in this particular game, and EA needs to take a step back and literally fuck its own face. Now, I say EA and not DICE because it's obvious DICE are developers and EA is squeezing the consumers out of money, which is admittedly, their purpose in life. It isn't a charity after all. EA isn't in it to make friends. Um, the problem here is setting a precedent. You see, the reason free-to-play games make a shit ton of money, like World of Warships and tanks and everything else, is because it's much easier to and more deceptive to charge people $1.99 per unlock instead of $50 for premium at a single time. Because you see, when you charge and spend, $1.99 for an unlock, you don't really feel it. You will, buy several unlocks throughout the months that you play, maybe 50, maybe 100 loot crates, but because they each cost $1.99, you won't really know you've spent hundreds of dollars on it instead of $50 just once. So this is a bit of an issue at the moment and definitely a sticking point for the game publishers going into the future. And I mean, I can understand them because they're trying to make the DLCs free for the entire game, because obviously a paid DLC splits the player base quite a bit and makes half of the community, not able to play with their friends unless they buy into the entire DLC model. But again, that's something for you people to decide. Leave me a comment below. Tell me, would you rather pay, $1.99 for a loot crate, which might have some stuff in it that makes you a better gunner, or would you rather pay $50 for a entire set of DLCs and, not pay anything else because you're done paying for the entire game? Well, now that we talked about the bad parts of it, let's try to focus on the gameplay and whatever else is going on here. I mean, the gunplay is nothing remarkable here. It's exactly what you'd expect from an arcade shooter. The abilities now replace the star cards from the previous game, which are kind of cool, but again, very similar and act exactly as you think they will. The classes generally have access to, the same abilities on both sides for obvious reasons. Now, my favorite game mode so far has to be the space battles, because, well, they just look amazing and are marginally different than flying in a battlefield game. Now, unlike the previous Battlefronts, this time DICE gave the starfighters a much needed better flight model, and the lasers now don't auto lock on as long as you hold the right mouse button. I mean, you can zoom in with the right mouse button. You still have access to photon torpedoes, which are a lock-on weapon, but they aren't very hard to dodge, and the Imperial bombers have a countermeasure which breaks lock, because bombers are generally very bad at turning. Now, having said that, the game will still show you a reticle for leading the target, because it's kind of in space it's kind of hard to tell which way is up and which way is down, and especially in the amazing shadows of on the other side, on the dark side, if I may, of the Star Destroyers, which again looks amazing. All the shadows and the light effects in space. Bombers are actually lethal against fighters and other interceptors. By the way, they will tear through them like a tissue at a snot party. But you will be targeted and spammed with auto lock-on missiles, photon torpedoes. So it becomes a bit of a clusterfuck for obvious reasons. And I'd suggest hanging back around the gun pods if you're an Imperial ship getting its ass kicked and, are in a cooldown for your abilities like the countermeasure. And the gun turrets won't kill the enemy, but they will sure sting a little and make them back off. Generally, I think the space battles are, as I said, a bit more fun, and the laser barrage will tear a Y-wing, like your uncle at the wedding cake at a friend's wedding. And now, I'd also like to say a few common sense word suggestions that I had for gameplay purposes. I will note before though that I'm not a particularly good shootist, and especially at game modes like Rush, I get torn to pieces, which the Strike game mode is very similar to. But here it's just incredibly one-sided, at least on the map that we were allowed to play in the beta, which I'm going to call the demo for obvious reasons. I think DICE needs to rebalance it, because so far it's just a massacre for the attackers. No matter how, from which angle they come at the defenders, they are just dug in there like ticks on a horse's ass, and there is just no way to get through and pick up the artifact. Especially now that they figured out that they can camp on the roof and shoot at the attackers as they come at you one by one. And, even if you don't get a kill from the roof, you can still wound them enough that that someone on the ground will finish them off very quickly. So it becomes a bit of a meat grinder, and so far in the 3 days of me playing this game mode sporadically, the attackers were able to score maybe a couple of touchdowns the entire time. It's just seriously one-sided. Another suggestion, it's kind of common sense, that I had for the game in general is decrease a little bit the amount of points you need to spawn as a hero or a hero ship if you're playing the Starfighter Assault. See, what happens in the new Star Wars Battlefront is they don't have randomly spawning heroes now that that anyone can pick up, and it's purely by chance. Now your points that you rack up by playing the objective, which by the way is a much better system in my opinion, well, these points let you then spawn as a hero or a hero ship of your choice. And there is nothing sexier than a Slave 1 dropping a gravity mine. That sound just... Well, you better have a tissue handy because you will mess up your pantaloons, is all I'm saying. But back to my thing. Well, the problem is, at least right now, as I see it, the rounds are generally so short, and you see the threshold for the heroes, for getting the heroes unlocked is so high that most rounds you don't even get to spawn as a hero at all. Which is a problem for obvious reasons, because who doesn't want to play as a Wookiee warrior? Well, actually, this might have been done on purpose by DICE, as they don't want a round with 10 Han Solos and no infantry running around. Kind of like tanks in Battlefield 1. They are more rare than a solid gold unicorn shooting rainbows that cures cancer. Having said that, I kind of like this game, but as with all AAA titles, I will again remind you and strongly suggest that you do not pre-order, no matter what the bonus is, or is it boni, that they offer you, like a polka dot bikini for Rey, or a polka dot bikini for Chewie. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I don't judge. So thanks for watching. Please rate and share this video as it helps my channel grow. Check out my other videos at the end of this one. And remember, in Soviet Russia, YouTube subscribes you.